Okay, I was going to give an example of what is happening, and I was going to cite the Agri-Agra law, where banks are required to extend, I think, 20-25% of their loanable funds directly to agricultural programs and projects. But the lobbying went on, and it became sufficient compliance for the banks to buy, to purchase treasury bills from government as compliance with that rule, which was originally intended to direct funding and credit to the real economy, real production. You know? So, you have anything to add to that?
It's really good. However, when it goes down to the grassroots and implementation and application, it's not really effective.
Which one? Which is good? Which is good?
I mean, the opportunity for the funds to...
But at least if it goes to the grassroots, it goes to the grassroots. Even if you don't collect, it has gone to the grassroots, it will circulate.
Yeah, that's,
but if it does not, for example, in the purchase of treasury bills, it will just circulate around government, back to the banks, and hanggang doon lang.
That's a good point, that there is an opportunity for that. And maybe one thing is the improvement and the monitoring and the coordination. So that's a good point, a good starter. Yes.
Okay, let's go to Jimmy.
The problem is that there is no structural changes taking place in the grassroots. The ownership of land remains to be the same. From the landlords who used to own the lands are now transferred to the so-called corporate farming lords. But the same landlords own the corporate. And they're trying to dupe the farmers by joining and lending their lands and being given a 30% share.
Okay.
So if that is the case, there's no structural changes, even if you pour in capital into the agricultural sector for development. What is to be developed are things to be exported. The corporate farming that produce banana will remain to be banana planters and banana exporter, and all they have to do is to borrow money to expand the land that they could rent to have more production.
But all this we can bring back to the issue of globalization.
But the issue is agriculture should serve the industrial direction. That the raw materials needed by the industries must be produced by agriculture. And first and foremost, it has to be geared towards the direction of food sovereignty or food
Well, in fact, the Pope mentions food security.
Yeah, food security.
Can we take a look again?
Yeah, it is a vital policy that you have food security, that will even lead to food sovereignty. But you cannot do that if the capital is being misused by pouring it into
Okay, you have to turn it off.
By pouring it into agricultural production of export commodities.
Yeah.
So we have to get rid of that, and we have to free ourselves from this.
Anyway, I'm certain the Pope gave particular reference to food self-sufficiency or food security, and that's one of the issue. Well, so again, let me summarize. The issue of the Pope is unregulated finance capital. We tried to cite examples of how this has become a problem even for the Philippines, but the deregulation or lack of regulation of finance capital, the unregulated finance capital that the Pope is referring to, is part of the whole principle of globalization. Jimmy, you know, liberalization, deregulation, privatization. It's part of the whole gamut of globalization. And in the Philippines, globalization has resulted in cases like what you're saying, you know, the banana industry just to be a component of the global economy. We're suppliers of banana to the industrial countries like Japan and so on. You know? Now we're also supplier of banana to China, which is industrializing. And anytime the Chinese or China wants to turn off the purchases, we have problems and we lose our leverage in other issues like the West Philippine Sea issue, di ba?
Kaya nga yung naging issue yung over concentration of wealth. Like for example, in our case, we remain to be agricultural. and yet the ownership of land has not yet been fully distributed to the land farmers in spite of the comprehensive agrarian reform program.
But even if you have the distribution or that issue, it's still under the umbrella of globalization.
That's
and the question is globalization intrinsically connected to the unregulated finance capital?
Yes.
It is, di ba?
Yes, yeah. And that's the reason why the policy remains to be a dictated policy as a result of the onerous multilateral agreements or bilateral agreements that government entered into. So there is no basic changes. We remain to be underdeveloped, and there is massive unemployment. The income bracket of the poor remains to be very low. Well, there is an overconcentration of 90% of the wealth in the hands of the few individuals.
Yeah. Well, that's why we have to focus on the root problem or the root issue. No? And again, that's why the Pope focused on unregulated finance capital. Because that is the root of all globalization also. And what is the question? Earlier I said we have to go back to the question of usury. You're familiar with usury?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Just a note with the message. I like to think that the message is not so much as to attack the government or the embrace capitalism in each society, for example, in the Philippines. It is a suggestive, like, help, to the state, so that because this capitalism, the globalization, is actually is innovation that creates lots of opportunities and freedom for each player to maximize whatever potential resources. In a sense, that is as well. There are effects. There are failures. Instead of being negative in a sense and skeptical, we start from there, and we do constant improvement.
Yeah.
So,
but we are coming at the end point of around 30 years of globalization of the global economy, and judgments are being made, and there is a general sense now that globalization has failed. In fact, there's a recent article by Robert Samuelson, The Retreat of Globalization. Even the U.S., I think Apple has started bringing in operations back to the U.S. It's starting with a small amount of reinvestment in the U.S., 100 million, but Robert Samuelson says it's a beginning. General Electric is also bringing back production from China slowly to the U.S. It's not going to be an overnight event. What you just explained is the doctrine about globalization. It is good in general, it creates opportunities, but actually the UNESCO has concluded that there are more poor people after globalization. I'll give you an example. Privatization of water has increased the cost of water all over the third world. So poverty has increased because of that. Why? Because finance capital again took over and privatized, pressuring governments to privatize water and electricity and so on. And with the profit motive of this finance capital coming in, tumataas ang lahat ng mga singil sa mga ito. And in the Philippines, a very clear case, Manila Water increased its rates just 2 days into the new year. From what MWSS was charging at around 2 pesos per cubic meter before, Manila Water is anywhere from 30 pesos to 40 pesos. Yeah.
With regard to the globalization, way back then, that was an idea that was implemented as a result of deficiency or inefficiency that's being observed. And it seems like a trial and error. So we're learning through the years.
Yeah, but there are some of us who, from the very beginning of globalization, like Jimmy Regulario, myself, and others, who have always opposed this, because I think this is the dialogue I wanted with the younger generation. Because from our experience, every nation should set up its own self-sufficient economy, so that you are not chained to the interest of the powerful countries. For example, the Philippines now has to import patis, butong pakwan, our peanuts are imported from China. We produce nothing anymore of ourselves. Nothing, of course, is an exaggeration, but just to emphasize the situation the Philippines is in.
A general note to that, it will boil down to the current leadership. The
Okay.
strength of the current
Well,
leadership.
let me boil it down
Yes.
to your leadership, your generation. That is why we want to communicate with you. Don't make the mistake of just listening to the international advisors and so on. Let's go back to Jimmy Regalario.
Let to make it clear, no? Globalization is a scheme to prolong an old system of control by a few monopoly capitalists in the global economy. And because of borrowing, IMF and World Bank role, the structural adjustment program of the World Bank, then it leads to something that consolidated their control. And that is the World Trade Organization. So when we entered into the WTO, we entered into a box. So you want to have your policy, just move along within the box. And what did we do in being a member of the WTO? That was a force of circumstance because during those days, we're heavily indebted and our policy is really linked up to the policy of whoever is in control of the economy. And in that case, the United States was in control of our economy, finance, and the physical economy. Now, what did we do when we entered WTO? Apat lang yan. Una, we agreed on that multilateral agreement. Now you open your agriculture.
And then we delisted 1,000 items, Cory Aquino, immediately from
Correct,
protection,
We
tariff
open
protection.
our agriculture, then we allow every agricultural product from all over the world to enter into our agricultural market, and we have been wiped out. Why? Because we have a very high cost of production. I'll explain later why we have a very high cost of production. And then we open...
Let's give Tida a chance to...
I'll just elaborate what we did in these four things that we opened up during the as we entered the WTO. Second, we opened the industries. When we opened the industries, the same thing happened. Foreign commodities entered. We wiped out our manufacturing sector.
Okay.
And thirdly, after having done so, we protected the foreign commodity by recognizing the intellectual property rights. And then after that, we even opened the public utilities for foreign investment, and even the education and mass media was about to be open to them, not until the time that somebody filed a petition to the Supreme Court citing our heritage. So in effect, these are the four things that we are tied up to when we entered into that box called WTO. And that's the reason why they put it up and they call it globalization.
Okay, let me now ask Tida's reaction. So this is an honest dialogue between two generations. Go ahead, Tida.
I was
Is it
no. I was trying to say it has been ages and still true. As said, those very smart, quote unquote, businessmen, entrepreneurs are really powerful because they knew even the policymakers can have no clue as to their interests and how to maximize. They knew, in simplistic to say, exemption from taxes, for example. So they knew it is a manipulation thing. And so that's chaotic, but for them it's good. So, but yeah, the state, the government, so...
The state, the problem is, with the growing power of finance capital, they also begin to control government and the elections and the regulatory agencies and so on. We see in every election, Manny Pangilinan, I'm very specific because we have to be in the real world. No? This is not just theoretical. Gives to all parties, and then whoever wins, he has that great influence over it. That's why he can take over so many companies. And I think that the Pope from the Vatican, without reference to names and individuals and companies and corporations, is saying that these guys in the banking mafias and in the finance mafias are screwing the world. You know? And what you're saying is government has to do something about it. But if the government itself, if the politicians in the Senate and in the Congress are controlled by these people, what is there left for the people? That is why it is between you and me that several generations of citizens to learn and think about this and take action, di ba? What do you think?
Yes, it is becoming an outcry, And as said, if the government, the policymakers, especially the executive, even if branded as intelligent, but really not aware of what to do, especially with regard to the poor, then nothing will happen.
I'll give you one example before I go to Jimmy. The newly appointed Secretary of the Department of Energy, his first statements were to Pt2. His first statements were to say that in order to improve the energy sector, we have to have a bit of greed. Openly saying that as a government leader. I don't know how that's going to work when even government leaders are saying that we need greed, because government is supposed to be service, nothing over and above that. That is the highest value, to serve the public in general. So
I'm not sure what's the context of that.
But in any context, I think government does not encourage greed in government.
Greed in a sense to have concentration for the benefit of the quote-unquote family, that is especially to the marginalized.
Their own family.
They are,
not the families of Filipinos in general, because what is greed if not a selfish value, hindi ba? Then if you're talking about good for the poor families and so on, that's not going to be greed. That's going to be service. But the statement is very clear. We need a bit of greed. You remember June Losada on the NBN-ZTE scandal? Moderate greed. Everybody is justifying greed. Well, we'll go back to you, Tida. Think about it. Let's go to Jimmy.
Hindi, kasi it's a tenet that cannot be denied, that cannot be rebutted. Political power emanates from economic power. And then economic power is maintained through the development of a culture that serves the economic interest. So that is a basic and a universal truth that you cannot change. So what's happening now should be governed by that tenet or by that universal theory. Who are in control of the economy? The WTO, when we enter into it, then the landlords will have to produce the commodity that is needed to export, because we have to have export crops from the land. So the landlords became landlords in spite of the CARP. They changed it into corporate farming, and the corporate farms remains to be in the hold of these people who are used to be landlords. And then the traders remain to be trading commodities that are finished and commodities that is exported coming from the land.
The raw materials only.
Yeah. So they're the ones accumulating, kaya merong movimiento throughout the world, 99. Because there is an over-concentration of economic power in the hands of a few individuals. In our case,
maybe financial power also.
1 to 2% to 3%, around 200 families in control of the total wealth. Also, they're in control of the total wealth. Now it is manifested in the seizure or capture of political power in election. Who are getting elected? Those who have this money.
Yeah.
So this 1 to 3% who has the money or the economic power finance their candidates, or they themselves run as congressman,
and then
senator, and president.
They augment their family power, economic and financial power by using the pork barrel.
Correct. And then they take hold of the political power to maintain the policy, to maintain the system through the various policies, because the policy-making body, which is Congress, is being controlled by them.
Okay, we have our last 3 minutes. Tida, reaction.
Yes, that's almost becoming a fact or reality, the prevalence of existing like power, economic control. I'd like to think, hopeful for quote-unquote revolutionary government strategy in regards to like specific for the Philippine context. Like for example, in regards to patronizing our own goods, or even at one point to be our own and really check on the internal. So it is not with the existing, it's of the existing policies and tactics are failing. So it's more of personalized, customized, and or like root cause analysis, and honest what's really happening. It's not more of like the usual procedure that we have. So that's why I said
But
revolutionary
that's
discussions.
in the spirit of a nationalist economy and against the spirit of globalization, what you have just been saying. You see? So I think what we are trying to generate here is a wisdom from the generations. No? The reason why we need to communicate with you and people like Lisa, I don't understand the internet as well as you do. But at the same time, we also see there are things that we have learned from experience, not from the information environment that exists today, which is geared towards justifying the present powers and the present system. So this is a very important dialogue, at least for me, and hopefully for our audience. Jimmy, ikaw, anong madadagdag mo? We have 2 minutes left.
Kailangan palitan yung sistema yan. That only a few takes hold of 90% of the wealth, while 3%, while the 99% are starving.
I will fast forward to the question because you made the point. Kontrolado tayo ng mga may pera, and this will continue. The question is how to break that. How to break it now.
To the Catholic Church. If 90% of our people are Catholic, now it will be manifested again during these processions of Nazarene. Sa Quiapo, you will see how devoted.
Although I have questions about that. Is that Catholicism?
But
or is that...
if the Catholic Church will try to rethink their position and reinvent their methodology and leading the flocks, I think they will really tell, they will really be a very spectacular and a very leading group that could lead the flock together and change the system for the betterment of the
We're running out of time. Hindi pa tayo nakapunta sa RH law, but precisely, we really wanted to concentrate on the
basically, you
economic.
mobilize the greater number of our people and direct them towards the direction of changing the system. Not unless we change the economic system and political structure, then definitely it will remain until the time that there will be a spontaneous combustion.
30 seconds.
The system will be changed within the system. What I can say is with regard to praxis, theory and practice, and hopefully to have the core team, a unified core team, who are really sensible and one direction with those revolutionary ideas. So it's within the system to implement concrete strategies.
But I just want to say, to conclude everything, to have a general idea, core values or things like that is not sufficient. Yeah, we have to define the socio-economic program. And that is why we have Jimmy Regalario here and their movement. And actually, I think that is the response of the Catholics to the challenge that the Pope has expressed. You must have, we have to build a national economy again. A sariling ekonomiya, sariling production of what we need to survive and to grow and to prosper as a people.
Yeah. You got the direction.
We've run out of time. I wish we had more, but we'll have another round and ipapasok na natin yung prospects of the RH law and how things will turn out by the end of 2013. Okay, we have to say goodbye. Have a good weekend and mabatis tayo sa buong Pilipinas at sa buong mundo because we are seen all over the world. Okay, so